Well, welcome to the November 19th, 2021 Citizen Oversight Board meeting. Thank you all for joining. We have a very light agenda for our public meeting today, and I think we'll be able to get through that fairly quickly. We do have a lot of topics for our executive session, so there should be a full set of meetings today, just maybe not as much in the public eye. Just a couple of updates from me in terms of new board business, and then we'll get into approval. Oh, I guess we'll do approval of minutes first. So did everybody have a chance to read the minutes, and are there any changes? If not, can I get a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Great, and a second.
Second.
Don't forget to change your name on your screen too. We have a number of board members who are slightly anonymous now. Great, all in favor of passing the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, the motion passes. Okay, so a few things from me in terms of board updates. So Daniel has done a great job in reaching out to Denver Health and follow up from our last meeting to get some more information about how mental health and the opioid crisis is managed through that partnership. Emails went around the organization, as we understand it, last week, and then by the time they had gotten to the right person, it was too close to the meeting for them to be prepared for that. So we'll continue to find a time for them to join, but we don't have that scheduled yet. Perhaps what would make sense is if you have specific questions, we can give them questions in advance, and that might ease their concern that it'll just sort of be a random meeting for them to attend. We've also learned a couple of things about some programming through the Sheriff's Department itself, and that information has been provided to the board. I think there's some opportunities for us to follow up on that information because it does sound like there are additional mental health programs run through the Sheriff's Department, not just through Denver Health. So I think I personally would like to probe into that. And if you're interested in that, do read those materials. We have received documents from the Department of Safety regarding their suggestions and review of our suggestions and review of the policies related to the Public Integrity Division, the PID. I think what would be helpful is to have Daniel go through that. Since it's an in-process draft, I think we'll save that for exec session, but just want folks to know that they were responsive to their deadline. And if you haven't had a chance to review that, maybe pull that open while we're chatting. Short story is I think a lot of our suggestions will be declined. Okay, next, wanted to give you all an update on the hiring process for the independent monitor. So this afternoon, I have a meeting with the committee, which is defined in statute, to start my engagement with that group again. That is a judge, a member of the HR department from the city, a member of city council, citizen oversight board, and a member of NACOL. And he's no longer a member of NACOL, but it's the public safety community at large, is really the bucket that he's representing. So that should be a good dialogue and really just getting that process up and running. Kind of key outcomes from that are confirming and approving our timeline for moving. I'm also hoping to get their feedback on what they heard in the August public or community engagement session. So what is the community hoping for? And really understand what they learned there. The other thing is to talk with them about where the committee's work ends and the COB's work begins, and how we interface with 2G. That is a little bit different, I think, than how it would have been a month ago. Additionally, the position closed, or closes today, actually. So that's all great news and moving forward with that. I have had also a number of conversations with the city attorney's office to understand sort of the implications of 2G on this process specifically and how this can all work. I have a follow-up with them next week to get a formal memo from them, and would love a lawyer on the board to join me for that conversation. Looking at you two, and if anyone is free on Wednesday,
There's looking at you.
there are only so many. So if either of you are free, I think the meeting is 8 or 8:30 on Wednesday morning.
And Julie, I'd like to state for the record that I'm a recovering lawyer.
Oh, well,
Not
you're
a-
welcome to enter the mix then. So the meeting's 8 to 8:30 on Wednesday, and they'll deliver a formal memo. I only play a lawyer on TV, so I'd appreciate somebody with that training to be in that meeting.
I can available, but yeah, if Stefan wants to do it, that's cool too.
Oh, I mean, I don't have any preference. I'm available. That'd be only 8 to 8:30 though, right? Next Wednesday, the 24th.
24th, 8 a.m.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll go, Stefan, just so we can stop leaning on our crutch as Katina rolls off the board. But if you'd like to join too, Katina, I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on the conversation.
I'm nosy, so I might.
Yeah, do it. Do it.
Okay. Promises to be an interesting discussion. Okay, so I'll invite both of you to that. Let me just take that action item. Okay, great. Thank you for that.
It'll be a Zoom call, Julia, I take it.
Say that again.
It'll be a Zoom call, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Oh, if 3 of us are on it, does it become a public meeting? No, because it's related to hiring matters. Okay, great. Daniel, are there any other items that we were going to cover as part of the board updates?
Yeah, I have a, excuse me, probably should have cleared my throat before I unmuted myself. Yes, just a few quick hits. The 2022 board calendar with guests lined up for their slots is now available in the Google Drive, and I'll be sending it out to everybody shortly. But that is now, everything is lined up. Obviously, we can still make changes if we need to, but it'd be easier if we didn't. So that has been done. I have also just this week finished making sure that all of the documents and PDFs, reports, minutes, etc., on our website are fully ADA compliant. So they will work with screen readers, verify that the contrast ratios are sufficient, text size, etc. So that is now done. That's been something that I've been working on in my abundant spare time. For the record, not abundant spare time. I also did hear back from the nominating committee about the board vacancies that they're working to fill. And so they have selected their top candidates and they will be interviewing them the week after Thanksgiving. So that's the week after next. And they anticipate having their first slate of 3 candidates to deliver to City Council shortly thereafter. And then once City Council makes their first selection or determination, then they will return the 2 that were not selected to the main pool and then present a second slate after that. So we should have a new board member, I would imagine, an early January is my best estimate at this point. City council could move fast, could move slow. And then the second board member would probably be February or March probably March would be my guess. So that's where that stands.
I have a question.
Yes.
So both Katina and Molly were city council appointees. That's why. Go to them. Okay.
Yeah. So city council is responsible for replacing both positions.
Yeah.
Great. And then finally, I chatted with Matt from OIM about annual report data. And in our annual reports, we usually include two tables. One of them is about the number of complaints, investigations, disciplinary actions, and critical incidents. And then the other one is about OIM performance metrics. If we want any other data from OIM, we are going to need to request that within the next month. So just to give them time to make sure that they're pulling accurate data, and they're going to be working on their annual report as well. So it's not a requirement, but if there is any other data that we want that we would need them to pull, we do have a deadline on that.
Just to be clear, what we've asked for is what we typically include in the report. And so this would be above and beyond anything.
Yeah, anything above and beyond if we want to change what we've been normally reporting on. That is becoming a priority now. And so I'm going to be, if anybody has anything they'd like to be included in the report for this cut for 2021, now is the time to be letting people know, letting me know, letting Julia know, and so we can get working on that and making sure that everything that the board wants in the report is in fact able to be put in the report.
Okay. The only other thing that we had to cover as part of the standing agenda was a little bit of discussion about the retreat or the strategic planning activity that we'd like to do. So if everyone recalls, as part of our budget request this year, we got approved funding to hire an outside facilitator and conduct some strategic planning as a board. Daniel and I have been talking about some ideas for having that happen, and wanted to have a quick discussion with the board, or a long discussion if you'd like, about what might work for board members in terms of that activity. I have done, go to a place and, do strategic planning away from home. I have also done, spend a day and a half, but stay at home kind of strategic planning. My feeling is, in general, whatever we can do to make it easiest for people to attend and participate, that feels great, considering this will be our first go. So, the first question is, do we want to do something where it's a retreat and we go somewhere, or would we feel more comfortable, being in Denver and meeting in a place to have discussions? And then I have other questions. Thoughts on that?
I vote they're staying local. Oh, go ahead, Terrence. Go ahead.
I'm saying I'm okay with either. I'm just looking forward to meeting the folks I haven't met in person.
I agree with Terrence. I just think local might be easier, but I'm fine with a retreat elsewhere too, if that's the consensus of the board.
When we say elsewhere, what are we talking about?
It would be,
Cancun, no, just somewhere that we could drive to within like an hour,
Okay.
hour and a half.
yeah,
All right.
I would be looking
Okay.
within an hour's drive of downtown would be the goal.
All right. I can't do the mountains, but anything around here, I'm fine with.
Okay, so sounds like maybe more votes for local than travel. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think we should probably just keep it local for now.
Okay. The next question for the group is, these things can last for a week if we want, or a day if we want, or a few hours, right? My thought is I start to lose attention after about a day and a half of anything. So that would be sort of the max parameter. Of course, we'll hire an outside firm to sort of plan this, but how much time would people be interested in investing? And then the next question on that is, would you rather do like a Friday, Saturday, or sort of only a weekend? Like what does Monday through Friday feel like compared to Saturday, Sunday? In terms of availability and scheduling.
My availability is all over the place, just depending on what month and what week we're talking about. So maybe we could do like a doodle poll and give a number of options to people.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I know weekends are the best for me, obviously going to be best for most of us, but something in the morning be my preference.
And that'd be fine with me too. Morning, weekend would be fine with me.
I'm good to devote a Friday as well. I'm happy to take that time from work. Weekends are family time for me, so I feel protective of that. I'd rather spend time with my family than my coworkers, I guess. Don't tell them. Oh, this is a public meeting.
We could also do a Friday evening and then a Saturday morning, if that would sort of allow people to get sort of the best of both worlds, or at least the least worst of both worlds.
Okay. So we'll send out a poll, but it sounds like weekend is preferred, and we can figure out outside of work. It's our best set of parameters. But next up then will be to, I think we will RFP, but Daniel, you'll have to kind of learn how that goes at the city for some support. If you know of folks in this space who do this work, please hit Daniel up with names so we can be targeted in our ask. And that would be great. I think the goal is really like in the first half of the year, even in the first quarter of the year, if we can, just so we can direct the work of the team. I think that would be great. So awesome. Thank you for that. I think that's all we have on the board updates and new business. Do other board members have anything they'd like to cover? Okay. Greg, oh, go ahead.
Did we want to talk about community outreach for our community events related to the hiring of the monitor?
I think let's save it till our next meeting. Let me get with the committee and sort of understand the scoop there and then come back to the board. That said, be thinking about organizations you'd like to engage as part of the hiring process, or any community members that you'd like to be a part. Per our timeline, that's really in the like February-ish timeframe. So more to come on that, but it's good for us to just have some lists made for people we want to make sure are participating in that. Okay, Greg, over to you if you've got anything for public discussion. You can see your mouth move, and I think what you said is, can you hear me okay? But can't hear you.
Yeah, that was good. Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, great.
All right. No, nothing for public session. We're just trudging along, trying to keep up with everything and getting caught up in the boxes. So, on our case review. Okay,
perfect. So let's shift over to executive session if there are no additional topics in this public forum. We'll see you over there. Thank you.